The narrative begins with a deeply disturbing image of a man slowly drowning. As the water completely envelops him in the background, his voice echoes in anguish, saying that everything he did was for her, that he gave everything he had, sacrificed himself entirely, and questions why none of it was enough. Beyond the loss, it seems he was also disappointed in love. The scene then abruptly cuts to a dark and silent funeral, where we are introduced to the protagonist, Eric Blake, a man emotionally destroyed, visibly broken by pain and devastated by loss, who has just buried the most important person in his life, his wife. As the coffin is slowly lowered into the grave, Eric notices something unsettling in the distance, a dark, motionless figure watching him from the shadows. Suddenly, the coffin begins to shake violently, and Eric wakes up startled in his own home. It was all just a nightmare, yet the pain is real. His wife died recently, and he has never been the same since. His only companion now is his faithful dog, Baxter. Sitting silently at the table while drinking coffee, Eric stares emptily at the newspaper until an unusual job advertisement catches his attention. The ad shows that on a remote island in Scotland, there is a search for a shepherd to take care of 600 sheep. The place is completely isolated, far from everything and everyone, and perhaps that is exactly what Eric is looking for, an escape from constant grief and the painful memories that haunt him daily. Without thinking twice, he decides to accept the job. But something strange begins to manifest inside the house when Eric sees a small hand emerging from inside the wardrobe and, upon checking, finds only the image of a child who was never born, very likely his son, who left along with his wife. The next day, Eric heads toward the island and along the way stops at his parents' house. He knocks on the door and his mother answers, but instead of warmth, she receives him with coldness, hostility, and contained anger. She blames him for marrying a woman she never accepted, an atheist woman, and in her eyes, Eric not only turned his back on religion, but also on his own family. She refuses to forgive him, and even in the midst of grief, Eric, heartbroken, walks away in silence without reacting. Later, he finds himself sitting by the edge of a lake, consumed by dark thoughts. He throws away his wedding ring, takes a small pocket knife from his pocket, and seriously considers ending his own life, but cannot gather the strength to do so. At that moment, he spots a sheep in the distance, and this simple instant brings him back to reality. He remembers the reason for the journey, takes a deep breath, and decides to move forward. Next, Eric appears on a boat beside a woman named Fisher, who is the one who offered him the job. Fisher is a strange figure, with one eye visibly damaged, and carries an uncomfortable, almost threatening presence. Before they reach the island, she asks if Eric smokes, and he answers that he does not, although he carries with him a lighter that belonged to his wife. Fisher then asks if his wife is with him, and Eric remains silent. Curious, she asks how he found the job, and he says he saw the ad in the newspaper, but Fisher insists, asking enigmatically how the job found him. Eric avoids answering directly, and simply states that he wanted to be alone and therefore accepted the offer. Upon arriving at the desolate island, Fisher shows him an old, deteriorated cabin and an isolated lighthouse, but does not go past a certain point, as if there were an invisible boundary she cannot cross. She hands him a key, saying that this is his home now. She explains that the water does not always work, that there is a generator that can be fixed if possible, that the phone does not work in bad weather, and that there is a map inside the cabin. She says she hopes he will be fine, and as she turns to leave, Eric asks if she will simply leave him there. Fisher coldly replies that this is not her place. Before departing, she gives him a blank journal to record anything important and informs him that she will return the following Tuesday with supplies, then leaves immediately, leaving Eric completely alone. Inside the cabin, everything is in terrible condition, abandoned and dirty, but after cleaning it with effort, Eric manages to make it minimally habitable. When he opens the tap, he realizes no water comes out and consults the map to locate a nearby spring. Taking Baxter with him, he goes to the source and there finds an old rusted ring, possibly belonging to someone who lived on the island before, and decides to keep it. Back at the cabin, he fixes a broken clock hanging on the wall, and later, when he picks up a cup, memories of his wife suddenly return, as it was she who used it. Before nightfall, Eric tries to feed and count the sheep using the journal, but his mind is confused, scattered, and he remains deeply unsettled. That night, he flips through old journals left in the cabin and finds a page stating that she is a witch, still not knowing exactly whom the text refers to. The bedroom is on the upper floor of the house, revealing something crucial about Eric. He suffers from acrophobia, an intense fear of heights. Gathering courage, he climbs the stairs, but something feels wrong. Baxter becomes restless, alert, and nervous, as if sensing that something is not right, making it clear that the house is not welcoming. A violent storm hits the island during the night, with howling winds and strange noises echoing in the darkness. Eric hears whispers, soft and disturbing voices hovering in the air, and sleep does not come, while his eyes repeatedly turn toward the lighthouse outside. Since arriving on the island, he has heard these murmurs and tries to convince himself that everything is just in his head, since he is the only human being there. The next morning, Eric wakes shaken, tired, and confused, and something does not seem right when he notices a cup of hot tea on the table, freshly prepared, without remembering having made it. Ignoring the strangeness, he gets ready and goes out to feed the sheep, but something sinister happens. As soon as they see him, the sheep begin emitting sounds of panic and alarm, different from an ordinary bleat, as if sensing an invisible presence. Eric shouts and instantly they all fall silent, staring fixedly at him. Terrified, he runs back to the cabin and in an intense emotional outburst, breaks the cup that belonged to his wife, as the memories have become unbearable. Later that same day, Eric goes out again and catches a glimpse of Fisher on the island, standing outside the lighthouse. Something is wrong, as she neither speaks nor looks at him. Eric calls her name, but she simply turns around and walks away. Confused and disturbed, he wishes to follow her to the lighthouse, but to do so he would have to climb the stairs, and his fear of heights prevents him, despite his growing curiosity. Night falls again and Eric cautiously goes upstairs to sleep, while Baxter begins to growl in warning, as if knowing they are not alone. Trying to ignore the fear, Eric falls asleep and enters another nightmare, in which he sees his beautiful wife standing in the forest, while a black shadow approaches menacingly. He wakes up in a cold sweat, and what he sees next is even more shocking. His mother is in the kitchen, calmly preparing breakfast. Eric is stunned and tries to understand how she arrived there, but she does not answer and begins to blame him for everything, cursing his dead wife and scolding him as if he were a child. Exhausted and consumed by grief, Eric does not react and simply eats, that being his first proper meal in days. However, while washing the dishes, he realizes that something is very wrong when his mother's behavior changes drastically. Disturbed, he tries to understand how she knew he was there and how she arrived on the island, but instead of answering, she picks up a knife and begins cutting her own hand in front of Eric's horrified eyes. Her voice changes, her face contorts, and she no longer seems like the same person. Then she advances toward him with the knife. Eric screams and wakes up startled, realizing it was yet another nightmare. He runs downstairs and finds the cabin empty, with his mother gone, leaving no doubt that his mind is fragmenting, and things get even worse when Baxter disappears. Eric calls for the dog repeatedly, but there is no answer, and Baxter is nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the phone rings, and it is Fisher, who calmly asks if he is all right. Eric says yes, but states that something does not seem right, and she simply says that then it is beginning. Eric asks if she was on the island the previous day, and she confirms it, saying she could not find him. When he mentions that Baxter disappeared, Fisher coldly replies that he needs to find him and hangs up. Trying to wake himself from the sensation of hallucination, Eric slaps himself, but everything is real. Determined, he goes out into the fog to search for Baxter, and the island is now completely covered by dense mist. He does not find the dog, but sees a dark figure in the distance that, upon approaching, turns out to be just a large rock. Disoriented, he continues wandering until he finds the wreckage of an old ship, rusted and decaying. He enters the vessel, but the place is completely devoid of any life. Inside, he finds a key, which he decides to keep, soon after feeling a presence behind him, like a shadow watching him, but without turning around, he silently moves away. Alone and increasingly losing his grip on reality, Eric returns to the cabin, where the silence is deafening. In the bedroom there is an old wardrobe, and for days he has felt that something hides inside it. Summoning courage, he takes a knife and opens the doors, finding only a bird statuette with one eye replaced by a button. Later, he realizes that the sheep have also disappeared, and while searching for them, sees them in the distance on the hills, but the calm does not last. Back at the cabin, the phone rings again, and Fisher, now with a darker voice, states that this is his home now and that his punishment has begun. On the verge of tears, Eric begs, saying it was an accident and that he had no intention. It is then revealed that he was driving when his wife argued with him about the state of their relationship, and in anger she punched his arm. This caused an accident, making the car flip and fall down the embankment into the sea. However, she does not listen to him and ends the call, leaving in the air the doubt of whether that is truly what happened. Haunted and desperate, Eric decides to do the one thing he has avoided until now: enter the lighthouse. Using the ship's key, he unlocks the door and finds the interior covered in dust and filled with bird statuettes, all missing an eye, replaced by a button. Trembling, he climbs the stairs and at the top flips the switch, causing the lighthouse to light up. In the distance, Fisher watches the light, and her expression reveals that she did not want him to enter there. As he descends, Eric slips, hits his head, and becomes injured and dazed, but what he sees next is terrifying. All the sheep have been slaughtered and grotesquely hung on several wooden crosses, and among them he finds Baxter dead. Devastated, Eric begins to question his own reality, and comes to believe that perhaps he is already dead, and that the island is hell itself. In despair, he locks himself in the house and begins to have visions again, including the mysterious child who continues to appear. Grief, guilt, and the voices become unbearable, leading him to spread gasoline across the floor with the intention of burning the cursed house. Before setting it on fire, the entity appears, revealing its face as that of his wife, who looks at him with deep pain in her eyes and asks why he did that. In panic, Eric sets the house ablaze and flees as the entity pursues him. He runs to the lake where Fisher's boat floats nearby, but she does not help him, only watches in silence. With no choice, Eric dives into the water and begins to drown, being rescued at the last moment. The next scene shows a police station, where Eric survived and is now being interrogated by a detective. At that moment, he reveals the truth and confesses that he killed his wife. The detective is confused, as the report indicated that Eric was the only occupant of the car that night. Eric then explains that he was drunk driving when the car lost control and became stuck on a cliff, and because he was afraid of heights, he jumped out. His wife was pregnant, and the car slipped, killing them both. He states that he killed 2 people that day. The detective says nothing and walks away. Shortly after, the phone rings, and it is Fisher, furious, saying that he should not have fled the island and that there will be consequences. Eric begs, stating that he confessed, accepted everything, and asks only to be left alone, but Fisher responds that he will never be able to leave that place, and adds something even more disturbing by saying that he killed his own mother, and that when he asked who she was, she answered that she was the servant of the hand of fate. The call ends. Eric sees a door in front of him, and upon opening it, a blinding light envelops him. Then he finds himself once again on the island, trapped once more. The story ends by revealing that the film is a journey about guilt and regret. The island, Fisher, and all the ghostly events may be manifestations of his tortured mind, of his deep grief, of his hallucinations, and of his inner demons projected onto that extreme isolation. Alternatively, under a supernatural interpretation, the island is real, and Fisher is a demonic entity that punishes those who try to flee from their sins.